The massive conference hall aboard the diplomatic ship Serenity's Dawn buzzed with quiet conversation. Representatives from 47 different species had gathered for the annual Galactic Confederation Folklore Symposium. The ship itself was a masterpiece of peaceful engineering, its curved walls decorated with art from 1,000 worlds and its atmosphere carefully balanced to accommodate the breathing needs of dozens of different life forms. Ambassador Vextai of the Althari Republic stood at the central podium, her blue-scaled skin shimmering under the soft lights. Her forearms gestured gracefully as she spoke, a habit that helped her audience follow her words through the universal translators they all wore. Today I wish to share with you the most fascinating collection of myths from the Outer Rim territories, she announced. These stories have been passed down for over 300 years, and they all center around a single, supposedly extinct species. A few delegates leaned forward with interest. The Zentari military attaché, Admiral Kethmore, made a sound that his translator rendered as a polite cough. His insect-like features showed mild amusement. The species in question, Vextai continued, called themselves humans. According to the legends, they originated from a small blue world in what we now call the Sol system, far in the Outer Rim. The stories describe them as bipedal mammals, roughly 2 meters tall, with only 2 arms and no natural armor or weapons. Several delegates exchanged glances. The peaceful Nexari captain, Yilara, tilted her head in the way her species showed curiosity. If they had no natural defenses, how did they become the subject of warrior myths? Vextai's translation device picked up what might have been laughter. That is exactly what makes these stories so interesting. The humans were supposedly weak individually, yet the myths claim they were the most dangerous species in the galaxy when they worked together. She activated a holographic display that showed primitive spacecraft designs recovered from ancient databases. The ships looked crude and angular, nothing like the elegant curves preferred by civilized species. According to the legends, humans had a unique approach to technology. While other species developed tools for specific purposes, humans apparently had a saying, "Everything is a weapon if you think about it hard enough." The stories claim they could turn mining equipment into warships, cargo containers into missiles, and communication arrays into jamming devices. Dr. Thexan, the lead xenobiologist from the academic world of Kepler Prime, made notes on his tablet. His tentacles moved quickly across the surface as he recorded the details. These sound like typical warrior culture exaggerations. Many primitive species develop myths about turning common objects into weapons. Perhaps, Vextai agreed, but the human myths go much further. They describe a species that didn't just fight wars, they apparently turned warfare itself into a science. The stories mention concepts like combined arms doctrine, tactical flexibility, and strategic paranoia. Our translation systems can barely process some of these terms. Admiral Kethmore's mandibles clicked in what his translator called skepticism. Paranoia is hardly a military virtue. No successful civilization builds its strategy on fear and suspicion. The human myths suggest otherwise, Vextai replied. According to the stories, humans believed that the best way to avoid war was to be extremely good at fighting it. They supposedly maintained massive military forces during peacetime, not for conquest, but to discourage potential enemies from attacking in the first place. Captain Yalara's pale features showed confusion. But that makes no sense. Military forces are expensive and dangerous. Why would any species waste resources on weapons they didn't intend to use? The myths claim that humans had another saying, Vextai said, "Si vis pacem para bellum." Our linguists believe it means if you want peace, prepare for war. The humans apparently believed that strength prevented conflict rather than causing it. The assembled delegates murmured among themselves. The concept was alien to most of them. The Galactic Confederation had maintained peace for over 2 centuries through diplomacy, cultural exchange, and mutual economic dependence. The idea of preparing for war to prevent it seemed backwards. Dr. Thexan raised one of his tentacles. What happened to these mythical humans? If they were as militarily successful as the stories claim, why did they disappear? That's the mystery, Vextai admitted. The stories simply end. About 300 years ago, all contact with the Outer Rim territories ceased. Some scholars believe the humans destroyed themselves in a civil war. Others think they were conquered by some unknown enemy. A few romantic academics suggest they simply left our galaxy entirely. Or, Admiral Kethmore interjected, they never existed at all. These stories have all the hallmarks of cautionary tales designed to keep young people from exploring dangerous territory. Don't go to the Outer Rim, children, or the scary humans will turn your ship into a weapon and use it against you. The conference hall filled with the various sounds that different species made when they found something amusing. The Althari delegates created a musical humming, while the Zentari produced rapid clicking noises. Even the normally serious academic representatives seemed entertained by the Admiral's comment. Vextai was about to respond when her personal communicator chimed urgently. She glanced at the device and her blue scales immediately shifted to a darker shade, a sign of concern among her people. I'm sorry, delegates, but I'm receiving priority communications from Confederation Central Command, she announced. Perhaps we should take a brief recess. But before anyone could move, the ship's general alarm began sounding. The pleasant conference lighting was replaced by the harsh red glow of emergency illumination. Captain Ylara was already speaking, rapidly into her own communicator, her normally calm demeanor showing signs of strain. All delegates, please remain calm, the ship's AI announced through the translation system. We are receiving urgent reports from long-range sensor stations in the Outer Rim territories. Multiple massive energy signatures have been detected in the Sol system. A sudden silence fell over the conference hall. Every delegate turned to look at Vextai, who was still holding her holographic display of primitive human spacecraft designs. Captain Ylara finished her conversation and addressed the room. Ladies, gentlemen, and respected entities, I've just received a full report from Confederation Fleet Command. Our deep space monitoring stations have detected what appears to be large-scale industrial activity in the Sol system. The energy signatures are consistent with massive spacecraft construction and movement. Dr. Thexon's tentacles stopped moving across his tablet. The Sol system, but that's the mythical human homeworld, Vextai finished. According to our sensors, something is building ships there. Lots of ships. Admiral Kethamore's mandibles clicked rapidly as he processed the information. What kind of ships? Are we looking at exploration vessels? Mining platforms? Captain Ylara consulted her communicator again. The energy signatures are unusual. The propulsion systems appear to be crude fusion drives, but they're powerful enough to move very large vessels. The construction techniques seem primitive by our standards, but the sheer scale of the operation is impressive. How many ships are we talking about? Asked Dr. Thexon. The initial count is over 2,000 vessels of various sizes, Captain Ylara replied. And the number keeps growing. Whatever's happening in the Sol system, it's been going on for quite some time. Ambassador Vextai deactivated her holographic display with one of her four hands, while using another to adjust her translator settings. Council members, I think we may need to revise our understanding of human mythology. Admiral Kethamore stood, his impressive height making him tower over most of the other delegates. Or we're looking at pirates using the Sol system as a base of operations. Abandoned systems are perfect for illegal shipbuilding. The energy signatures probably belong to criminals using stolen technology. That's possible, Captain Ylara agreed. But the scale suggests something much larger than typical piracy. We are looking at an industrial operation that would require millions of workers and enormous resources. Which brings us back to the humans, Vextai said quietly. According to the myths, they had a population of several billion on their homeworld alone. If even a fraction of them survived whatever happened 300 years ago. She didn't need to finish the sentence. The implications hung in the air like an unspoken threat. If the human myths were true, if they really were as militarily capable as the stories claimed, then the galaxy might be facing something unprecedented. Dr. Thexon was the first to break the silence. What does Confederation Fleet Command recommend? Captain Ylara checked her communicator one more time. They're assembling an investigation fleet. Nothing too large. We don't want to appear threatening if we're dealing with a previously unknown species. The mission will be to make contact and assess the situation. And if we find humans, asked Ambassador Vextai, then we follow standard first contact protocols, Captain Yalara replied. We approach peacefully, exchange information, and determine whether they're interested in joining the Confederation. Admiral Kethmore's translation device registered something that might have been doubt. And if they're not interested in peace? The question hung in the air unanswered. The Galactic Confederation had never encountered a species that wasn't interested in peaceful coexistence. The benefits of joining the galactic community were so obvious that every discovered civilization had eventually chosen to participate. Captain Yalara was quiet for a moment before responding. Then we'll deal with that situation when we encounter it, but let's not borrow trouble. For all we know, we'll find a peaceful civilization that's simply been rebuilding after some natural disaster. As the delegates began filing out of the conference hall to return to their quarters, Ambassador Vextai remained behind, staring at her now blank holographic display. The myth she had been sharing just minutes before suddenly seemed less like entertaining folklore and more like intelligence reports from a forgotten war. She activated her personal communicator and sent a priority message to the Althari High Council. The subject line was simple. Human myths may require immediate reassessment. In the depths of space, automated sensor stations continued their silent watch over the Sol system. The energy signatures they detected grew stronger by the hour, and the number of active spacecraft continued to climb. Whatever was happening in that distant star system, it was accelerating. The age of human mythology was coming to an end. What would replace it remained to be seen. 3 days later, the Confederation investigation fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system. Captain Yalara stood on the bridge of the Harmony of Worlds, watching the main display with growing amazement. What she saw challenged everything she thought she knew about spacefaring civilizations. The system was alive with activity. Massive orbital platforms surrounded the third planet, the blue world mentioned in the human myths. These weren't the elegant ring structures that most advanced species preferred, but rough industrial complexes that looked like they had been built by engineers who cared more about function than beauty. Analysis complete, Captain, reported Lieutenant Zexai, the ship's science officer. His reptilian features showed confusion as he read from his instruments. I'm detecting hundreds of shipyards, manufacturing facilities, and what appear to be defensive platforms. The construction style is unlike anything in our databases. Captain Yalara moved closer to examine the readings. What about the ships themselves? Over 3,000 vessels detected so far, Zexai replied. They range from small fighters to massive carriers. The design philosophy is unusual. The main screen zoomed in on one of the larger human vessels. It looked like someone had taken a cargo hauler and covered it with armor plating and weapons. Gun turrets sprouted from every available surface, and the hull was painted in a dark gray that absorbed sensor beams. They certainly don't believe in hiding their military capabilities, observed Commander Thelix, the ship's diplomatic officer. Her crystalline body shimmered as she spoke, a sign of nervousness among her people. No, they don't, Captain Yalara agreed. Send a standard first contact signal on all frequencies. Let them know we come in peace and wish to establish diplomatic relations. The response came within seconds, much faster than most species managed. A clear, strong signal in perfect galactic standard reached the Harmony of Worlds. Unknown vessel, this is Earth Defense Control. Welcome to the Sol system. Please maintain your current position while we arrange for official contact. A representative will meet with you shortly. Lieutenant Zexai looked up from his console in surprise. Captain, they're speaking fluent galactic standard. How is that possible? This is supposed to be first contact. Captain Yalara frowned. How long have they been monitoring our communications? Before anyone could answer, the tactical officer, Ensign Krelma, spoke up urgently. Captain, I'm detecting multiple small craft approaching our position. They appear to be escort fighters. The main screen switched to show a formation of 12 sleek fighters moving toward them in a perfect diamond pattern. Unlike the larger ships they had seen, these fighters were clearly built for speed and maneuverability. They also carried an impressive array of weapons for their size. Standard escort formation, Commander Thelix observed. They're being cautious, but not threatening. Open a channel to the lead fighter, Captain Yillara ordered. Channel open, Captain. Earth Defense Fighters, this is Captain Yillara of the Confederation vessel Harmony of Worlds. We appreciate your escort. Copy that, Harmony of Worlds, came the reply. The voice was crisp and professional, with an accent that the translation system couldn't quite process. I'm Flight Leader Martinez. My squadron will escort you to Checkpoint Alpha, where you'll meet with our diplomatic team. As the fighters took position around the Confederation ship, Captain Yillara couldn't help but notice their precise movements. Each pilot maintained perfect spacing and formation discipline. It was the mark of extensive training and experience. Flight Leader Martinez, she said, may I ask how long your people have been aware of the Galactic Confederation? There was a brief pause before the human pilot replied. That's a question for the diplomats, Captain. I'm just here to make sure everyone gets where they're going safely. The escort proceeded to a neutral meeting point, a small space station. That definitely hadn't been there 3 days ago. It was clearly human construction, built with the same functional aesthetic as everything else they had seen. The station was heavily armed and looked like it could defend itself against a significant attack. Impressive, Commander Thelix commented. They built a diplomatic facility in 3 days. That suggests remarkable construction capabilities. Or, they had it ready and waiting, Captain Yillara replied thoughtfully. The question is, waiting for what? The Harmony of Worlds docked at the station without incident. Captain Yillara selected a small diplomatic team and prepared to meet the humans face-to-face. As they walked through the docking tube, she noticed that even the station's corridors were built like fortifications, with thick walls and multiple security checkpoints. The meeting room was sparse but functional, with a large table and chairs, designed to accommodate various alien physiologies. The humans were already waiting when the Confederation delegation arrived. Captain Yillara got her first close look at the mythical species. They were exactly as the stories described, bipedal, mammals with only 2 arms and no visible natural weapons. They looked remarkably fragile compared to most spacefaring species, but there was something about their posture and the way they moved that suggested they were anything but helpless. Even in this peaceful setting, they carried themselves like soldiers. Welcome to the Sol system, said the lead human, a woman with short dark hair and intelligent eyes. I'm Commander Sarah Chen of the Earth Defense Force. Thank you for coming to meet with us. Captain Yillara performed the standard Confederation greeting, a gesture that her translator explained to the humans. Thank you for hosting us, Commander Chen. I'm Captain Yillara of the vessel Harmony of Worlds. We're honored to make first contact with your species. Commander Chen's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes suggested amusement. First, contact? Captain, we've been monitoring Confederation communications for over 30 years. We know all about your organization, your member species, and your territories. The admission hung in the air like a challenge. Commander Thelix's crystalline body flickered with surprise. You've been watching us? Why didn't you make contact sooner? We wanted to understand what we were dealing with, Commander Chen replied, simply. Your Confederation values peace and cooperation. Those are admirable goals. But we needed to know if you were capable of defending them. Lieutenant Zexhai spoke up. Defending them from what? Commander Chen gestured to a wall display that showed a map of the galaxy. Large red areas marked territories that the Confederation databases listed as unexplored or uninhabitable. The galaxy is a dangerous place, Lieutenant. Your Confederation controls maybe 30% of habitable systems. What do you think lives in the other 70%? Captain Yillara studied the map. Our exploration teams have found no evidence of hostile civilizations in those regions. Your exploration teams haven't been looking hard enough, Commander, Chen said quietly. Or maybe they haven't been looking in the right places. She touched a control, and the map zoomed in on a cluster of systems near the galactic rim. 3 months ago, 17 worlds in this sector went silent. Total communication blackout. What's your explanation for that? The Confederation officers exchanged glances. Captain Ylara felt a chill run through her. We haven't received any reports about missing colonies. Because they weren't Confederation colonies, Commander Chen replied. They belonged to independent species that hadn't joined your organization yet, species that are now extinct. Commander Thelik's body stopped shimmering entirely, a sign of shock among her people. Extinct? What happened to them? The same thing that's been happening to non-aligned species for the past 50 years, Commander Chen said. They were conquered, enslaved, or destroyed by something the survivors call the hegemony. She brought up new images on the display. Grainy sensor readings and blurry photographs that showed massive alien warships with organic curves and weapon systems that seemed to blend technology with biology. The Krillian hegemony has been expanding steadily for decades, Commander Chen continued. They target isolated worlds first, places that can't call for help. Your Confederation's policy of non-interference has left thousands of species defenseless. Captain Ylara felt defensive. We don't interfere because we respect the sovereignty of independent worlds. We can't force species to accept our protection. No, but you could have warned them about the threat, Commander Chen replied. You could have offered defensive alliances to species that wanted to remain independent. Instead, you focused on your core territories and ignored the outer rim. The accusation stung because it contained a grain of truth. The Confederation had indeed focused on maintaining peace among its member worlds, rather than expanding or actively defending non-members. What do you want from us, Commander? Captain Ylara asked directly. Commander Chen leaned back in her chair. We want to know if you're willing to fight for your ideals when talking isn't enough. The hegemony is moving toward Confederation. Space. In 6 months, maybe less, they'll reach your outer colonies. When that happens, will you defend them? Of course we will, Commander Thelik said immediately. The Confederation has defensive forces, exploration ships with light armaments. Commander Chen interrupted. Science vessels with emergency weapons. Police forces designed to handle pirates and smugglers. You don't have a military commander. You have a very well-equipped Coast Guard. Lieutenant Zexhai looked uncomfortable. Are you saying we can't defend ourselves? I'm saying you've never had to, Commander Chen replied. Your entire civilization is built on the assumption that everyone wants peace. What happens when you meet someone who doesn't? Captain Ylara was quiet for a long moment. What would you suggest? For the first time since the meeting began, Commander Chen smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. We suggest you let us show you what humans do best, she said. We've been preparing for this war for 30 years. We've built ships, trained crews, and developed tactics specifically designed to stop the hegemony. And what do you want in return? Captain Ylara asked. Recognition, Commander Chen said simply. A place in the galactic community for humanity. Trade agreements, technological exchange, mutual defense treaties. The same things any species wants when they join a larger civilization. That seems reasonable, Commander Thelik said. But why the military buildup? Why prepare for war instead of seeking diplomatic solutions? Commander Chen's smile faded. Because we've seen what the hegemony does to species that try to negotiate with them. We've listened to the final transmissions from worlds that tried diplomacy. We know what's coming, and we know that the only language the hegemony understands is force. She stood and walked to the window that looked out at the Earth orbital facilities. Your Confederation has created something beautiful, a community of species working together for mutual benefit. But beauty needs protection in a dangerous universe. Captain Ylara joined her at the window. And you think humanity can provide that protection? We think humanity can teach you to protect yourselves, Commander Chen corrected. The hegemony is coming whether we're ready or not. The question is whether the galaxy will still have a confederation when they arrive. 6 months after first contact with humanity, the worst fears of Commander Chen proved to be terrifyingly accurate. The Krillian hegemony struck without warning across 17 star systems simultaneously, catching the Galactic Confederation, completely unprepared for coordinated warfare on such a massive scale. Admiral Kethmore stood in the Emergency Command Center on Confederation Central, watching the tactical displays with growing horror. Each screen showed another system under attack, another world crying for help that he couldn't provide. "Status report," he ordered, his mandibles clicking with stress. Captain Veltar, his aide, consulted her data pad with trembling hands. "New. Harmony fell 6 hours ago. The hegemony forces bypassed our defensive stations entirely and targeted the civilian population centers first. By the time our ships could respond, they had over 2 million hostages." "What about the Kepler colonies?" "Same pattern, sir. They hit the schools, hospitals, and residential areas before our forces could evacuate them. Our captains are reporting that they can't engage the enemy ships without risking massive civilian casualties." Admiral Kethamore slammed his fist against the command table. The hegemony strategy was brilliant in its cruelty. By targeting civilians first, they forced Confederation military units to divide their attention between fighting and rescue operations. "How many refugees are we dealing with?" "Current estimates suggest over 15 million displaced beings across all affected systems," Captain Veltar replied. "Our emergency services are completely overwhelmed." The main screen switched to show footage from the Althari colony of Sapphire Bay. The once beautiful crystal cities were burning, their elegant spires reduced to glowing slag by hegemony weapons. Streams of refugees fled toward the spaceports, carrying whatever possessions they could manage. "The hegemony ships are unlike anything we've encountered," reported Dr. Thexan, who had been analyzing the enemy vessels. "They appear to use some kind of biomechanical technology. The ships actually heal themselves when damaged, and their weapons seem to adapt to our defensive systems." Admiral Kethamore turned to study the tactical readouts. "What are our fleet losses?" "Severe," Captain Veltar admitted. "The Peaceful Dawn was destroyed defending the civilian evacuation from New Kepler. The Harmony's voice suffered critical damage and had to withdraw. We've lost 12 ships in the past 8 hours." "And enemy casualties?" "Unknown, sir. Our weapons seem to have minimal effect on their biomechanical hulls. Even when we score direct hits, their ships regenerate the damage within minutes." The Admiral's translation device registered what might have been despair. The Confederation fleet had been designed for exploration and peacekeeping, not warfare against an enemy that seemed immune to conventional weapons. "Sir," Captain Veltar said quietly, "we're receiving priority communications from the Sol system. The humans are requesting immediate consultation." Admiral Kethamore had been dreading this moment. Commander Chen had warned them about the hegemony threat, but he had hoped diplomacy might still provide a solution. Now, with millions of beings dead or displaced, it was clear that the humans had been right about everything. "Put them through," he ordered. The main screen switched to show Commander Chen, now wearing the uniform of an admiral. She was standing in what appeared to be a military command center, surrounded by displays showing fleet movements and tactical data. "Admiral Kethamore," she said without preamble, "we've been monitoring the hegemony attacks. How bad is it?" "Catastrophic," he replied honestly. "They hit us simultaneously across 17 systems. Our forces can't engage them effectively without causing massive civilian casualties." "That's their standard opening strategy," Admiral Chen said. "They use hostages as human shields while they establish forward bases. Once they're entrenched, they'll start the systematic conquest of your core worlds." "Can you help us?" Admiral Kethamore asked, the words tasting bitter in his mouth. "We can stop them," Admiral Chen replied. "But we need full tactical control of the operation. No second-guessing, no political interference, and no attempts to negotiate with the enemy while the battle is ongoing." Dr. Thexan leaned forward. "Admiral Chen, surely there must be some diplomatic solution. The hegemony must want something. We can offer them." Admiral Chen's expression hardened. "Doctor, the hegemony doesn't negotiate. They conquer. Their entire culture is based on the belief that might makes right, and that weaker species exist only to serve stronger ones. They've exterminated dozens of civilizations, and they'll do the same to the Confederation unless someone stops them." "What do you need from us?" Admiral Kethamore asked. "Immediate authorization to engage hegemony forces in Confederation space," Admiral Chen replied, "and access to your emergency communication networks so we can coordinate with your civilian evacuation efforts." Admiral Kethmore looked around the command center at his staff. Every face showed the same mixture of fear and desperate hope. The Confederation had never been in a situation like this, and all their traditional solutions had proven inadequate. "You have full authorization," he said finally. "What's your plan?" Admiral Chen smiled, and for the first time since the crisis began, Admiral Kethmore felt a spark of hope. It wasn't a pleasant smile. It was the expression of someone who had been preparing for this moment for a very long time. "We're going to give the hegemony something they've never encountered before," she said. "An enemy that fights back." The human fleet that emerged from the Sol system 3 hours later was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Where Confederation ships were elegant curves and polished surfaces, human vessels looked like they had been built in scrapyards by engineers who expected to fight their way through hell. Every ship bristled with weapons. Even the smallest human fighters carried more firepower than many Confederation cruisers. The larger vessels looked more like mobile fortresses than spacecraft, with multiple layers of armor and redundant weapon systems. But it wasn't just the ships that impressed the Confederation observers. It was the way the humans organized their fleet. Instead of the loose formations preferred by most species, the human ships moved in tight, coordinated groups that could concentrate their firepower on specific targets. "Admiral," Captain Veltar reported from her monitoring station, "the human fleet has reached the Kepler system. They're requesting all available data on hegemony ship positions and civilian evacuation status." "Send them everything we have," Admiral Kethmore ordered. The main screen switched to show the tactical situation in the Kepler system. The hegemony had established orbital positions around 3 planets, using their biomechanical ships to create defensive barriers around the civilian population centers they had captured. "Standard hegemony fortress configuration." Admiral Chen's voice came through the communication system. "They're daring us to attack them while they hold the civilians hostage." "So what do we do?" Admiral Kethmore asked. "We show them why that's a mistake," Admiral Chen replied. The human attack began with something the Confederation had never seen before: coordinated electronic warfare. Human ships launched clouds of small drones that immediately began jamming hegemony communications and sensor systems. The organic enemy vessels began to move erratically as their coordination broke down. Then came the fighters. Human pilots flew in formations that seemed almost choreographed, weaving through defensive fire while launching precision strikes at specific points on the hegemony ships. Instead of trying to destroy the enemy vessels, outright they targeted weapon systems and propulsion units. "They're not going for kills," Dr. Thexan observed with amazement. "They're disabling the ships while avoiding the areas where civilians are being held." The larger human ships moved into position with mechanical precision. Instead of engaging in the individual duels that characterized most space combat, they concentrated their fire on single targets, overwhelming the hegemony's regenerative abilities through sheer volume of firepower. But the most impressive part of the human operation was happening away from the main battle. Specialized human ships, vessels that looked like heavily armed cargo haulers, were moving toward the planets where civilians were being held hostage. "What are those ships doing?" Captain Veltar asked. "Tactical extraction," Admiral Chen replied. "We're not leaving anyone behind." The extraction ships landed near the civilian detention centers while the space battle raged overhead. Human ground forces wearing powered armor that made them look like mechanical warriors stormed the facilities with precision that spoke of extensive training. "How are they moving so fast?" Admiral Kethmore wondered aloud. "Practice," Admiral Chen said simply. "We've run this operation 1,000 times in simulations. Every possible hegemony tactic, every type of civilian hostage situation. My people know exactly what to do." Within 6 hours, the Battle of Kepler was over. The hegemony fleet had been completely destroyed or disabled, and every civilian hostage had been rescued. The human casualties were remarkably light, fewer than 50 killed across the entire operation. But Admiral Kethmore knew this was just the beginning. The hegemony had suffered a major defeat, but they controlled hundreds of star systems and commanded fleets that numbered in the tens of thousands. "Admiral Chen," he said, "this was impressive, but the hegemony will retaliate. They'll send much larger forces next time. Yes, they will, Admiral Chen agreed. Which is why we need to take the fight to them before they can reorganize. You want to invade hegemony territory? I want to end this war before it destroys half the galaxy, Admiral Chen replied. The hegemony has been expanding for decades by conquering isolated worlds and weak civilizations. They've never faced an enemy that was prepared for them. Admiral, Kethmore felt a chill run through his exoskeleton. What are you proposing? Total war, Admiral Chen said without hesitation. We're going to hit every hegemony stronghold simultaneously. We're going to destroy their shipyards, liberate their slave worlds, and show the galaxy that tyranny has consequences. But the cost will be much less than the cost of letting them continue, Admiral Chen interrupted. Admiral, the hegemony has enslaved or exterminated over 200 species. They're not going to stop until someone makes them stop. Admiral Kethmore was quiet for a long moment. Everything about human military thinking went against Confederation principles of minimal force and diplomatic solutions, but the results spoke for themselves. The hegemony had been decisively defeated with minimal civilian casualties. What do you need from us? He asked finally. Time, Admiral Chen replied, and trust. Give us 6 months to prepare, and we'll give you a galaxy where species like yours can exist in peace. As the communication ended, Admiral Kethmore looked around his command center. The emergency displays were already showing new hegemony movements, fleets repositioning, reinforcements being called up from reserve systems. The enemy was preparing for a much larger war. But for the first time since the crisis began, Admiral Kethmore felt something he hadn't expected to feel again. Hope. The humans had done something the Confederation thought impossible. They had defeated the hegemony in open battle while protecting every civilian. If they could do it once, maybe they could do it again, and maybe, just maybe, the galaxy would survive this war after all. The massive human fleet assembled at the Kepler's stand system looked like nothing the galaxy had ever seen before. Over 400 ships of various sizes floated in perfect formation, their dark hulls bristling with weapons that seemed to have been designed by engineers who expected to fight against impossible odds. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of the flagship Indomitable, watching the final preparations for what she knew would be the decisive battle of the war. Around her, human officers worked with the calm efficiency that came from months of intensive training and preparation. Status report, she ordered. Commander Williams, her tactical officer, consulted his displays. All ships report ready for combat operations. Fighter squadrons are loaded and armed. Ground assault teams are standing by. What about our Confederation? Allies? Admiral Kethmore's fleet is holding position at coordinates 77 Alpha. They have 43 ships, mostly cruisers and support vessels. Admiral Chen nodded. The Confederation had insisted on participating in the operation, despite their ships being poorly equipped for major combat. She respected their courage, even if she worried about their effectiveness. Ma'am, reported Lieutenant Torres from the communications station, we're receiving final intelligence updates from our reconnaissance drones. The main screen switched to show the hegemony stronghold at Kepler's stand. It was a massive fortress, system built around 3 heavily fortified worlds with defensive platforms that could house thousands of biomechanical ships. Analysis? Admiral Chen asked. Commander Williams highlighted key points on the display. The hegemony has concentrated approximately 8,000 combat vessels in the system. They're arranged in standard defensive formations around their 3 fortress worlds. They're expecting us to attack the fortresses directly, Admiral Chen observed. Standard siege warfare. That appears to be their assumption, Commander Williams agreed. Our intelligence suggests they've positioned their strongest ships to defend the orbital platforms. Admiral Chen smiled grimly. Then we're going to disappoint them. Initiate Operation Sledgehammer. What happened next demonstrated why humans had become the most feared warriors in the galaxy. Instead of attacking the heavily defended fortress, the human fleet split into dozens of smaller groups and struck at targets throughout the system simultaneously. Human fighters operating in coordinated squadrons swept through the outer defensive perimeter like schools of deadly fish. They didn't engage in individual duels with enemy ships. They attacked in groups, concentrating their firepower to destroy targets quickly and efficiently. But the real shock came from the human capital ships. Instead of the elegant long-range battles preferred by most species, human warships closed to point-blank range and unleashed devastating firepower at close quarters. "They're using ramming tactics," reported Captain Veltar from the Confederation observation vessel. "The human ships are actually colliding with hegemony vessels." "Not ramming," Admiral Kethmore corrected, studying the tactical displays more carefully. "Boarding." The human ships were indeed making contact with enemy vessels, but they weren't trying to destroy them through collision. Specialized boarding pods launched from the human ships and attached themselves to hegemony hulls like mechanical parasites. "What are they doing?" Dr. Thexon asked from his position at the science station. The answer came as explosions began blooming throughout the hegemony biomechanical ships. Human boarding parties were fighting their way through the enemy vessels, targeting critical systems from the inside. "It's brilliant," Admiral Kethmore realized. "The hegemony ships are designed to regenerate damage from the outside, but they can't repair internal systems while they're being destroyed from within." The battle quickly turned into a nightmare for the hegemony forces. Their carefully planned defensive formations fell apart as human boarding parties systematically disabled their command and control systems. Ships that should have been coordinating, their defense instead found themselves fighting individual battles for survival. But Admiral Chen wasn't content with simply defeating the enemy fleet. As hegemony vessels began surrendering or fleeing, human ships moved toward the fortress worlds themselves. "Admiral," Commander Williams reported, "we're receiving surrender offers from the fortress commanders. They're requesting terms." "Standard liberation protocol," Admiral Chen replied without hesitation. "All hegemony military personnel are to be disarmed and detained. All slave populations are to be freed immediately. Any resistance will be met with overwhelming force." The liberation of the three fortress worlds revealed the true horror of hegemony rule. Massive slave camps held millions of beings from dozens of different species, all working under conditions that would have been considered criminal anywhere in the Confederation. Human ground forces, supported by Confederation humanitarian teams, began the massive task of processing refugees and providing medical care to beings who had been enslaved for years or even decades. "Admiral Chen," Admiral Kethmore called from his ship, "we're finding evidence of systematic extermination programs on the Second World. The hegemony has been killing any species they considered genetically inferior." Admiral Chen's expression darkened. "Document everything. The galaxy needs to see what we're fighting against." The most shocking discovery came on the Third World, where human intelligence teams found massive archives containing the hegemony's long-term expansion plans. The documents revealed an empire that intended to conquer the entire galaxy, with specific timetables for the destruction of every non-hegemony species. They weren't just planning to conquer the Confederation, Dr. Thexon reported after reviewing the files. They were planning to exterminate every species that couldn't be enslaved effectively. Admiral Chen studied the intelligence reports with growing anger. "How many species have they already destroyed?" "According to these records, over 400 distinct civilizations have been eliminated in the past century," Dr. Thexon replied. "Most of them never had the chance to call for help." The strategic implications were staggering. The hegemony wasn't just an aggressive empire. They were conducting genocide on a galactic scale, systematically eliminating entire species to make room for their own expansion. "This information needs to reach every civilized world in the galaxy," Admiral Kethmore said. "Species that have been neutral in this conflict need to understand what they're really facing." But Admiral Chen was already planning the next phase of the war. The victory at Kepler's stand had been decisive, but the hegemony still controlled hundreds of star systems and millions of enslaved beings. "Commander Williams," she ordered, "initiate Phase 2 operations. I want simultaneous strikes against every major hegemony stronghold within 50 light-years of this position." "Ma'am, that's over 30 systems. We don't have enough ships for that many operations." "We don't need to occupy every system," Admiral Chen explained. We just need to demonstrate that nowhere in hegemony space is safe from retaliation. What followed was a campaign unlike anything in galactic history. Human task forces struck deep into hegemony territory, targeting shipyards, supply depots, and command centers. They moved too fast for the enemy to coordinate a response, hitting multiple targets before disappearing back into hyperspace. The psychological effect was devastating. The hegemony, which had built its empire on fear and intimidation, suddenly found itself on the defensive. Slave worlds began to revolt when they realized that liberation was possible. "Admiral," reported Commander Williams, "we're receiving communications from 17 different systems. Local populations are requesting assistance in overthrowing their hegemony occupiers." "Grant all requests," Admiral Chen ordered. "Deploy liberation teams to every system that asks for help." Admiral Kethmore, observing the campaign from the Confederation fleet, was amazed by the scope of the human operation. "Admiral Chen, how are you coordinating all these simultaneous operations? The logistics alone should be impossible." "Human military doctrine emphasizes decentralized command," Admiral Chen explained. "Every ship captain, every ground commander, knows the overall mission objectives. They don't need detailed orders from headquarters. They just need the freedom to accomplish their assigned goals." The concept was alien to most galactic civilizations, which preferred centralized control and detailed planning, but the results spoke for themselves. Human forces were achieving objectives faster than the hegemony could respond to threats. Within 6 weeks, the tide of war had turned completely. The hegemony's outer territories were in revolt. Their supply lines had been cut and their leadership was fragmented by constant attacks on their command structure. "Admiral," Commander Williams reported, "we're receiving a priority communication from Hegemony Central Command. They're requesting a ceasefire." Admiral Chen's expression showed no mercy. "Terms: complete withdrawal from all conquered territories, release of all enslaved populations, and war crimes tribunals for their leadership." "Acceptable, but incomplete," Admiral Chen replied. "Add full reparations to the species they've harmed, supervised disarmament of their military forces, and mandatory monitoring to prevent future aggression." Admiral Kethmore interrupted the conversation. "Admiral Chen, those terms are essentially unconditional surrender. The hegemony will never accept them." "Then they'll face complete destruction," Admiral Chen replied calmly. "Admiral, the hegemony has committed genocide against over 400 species. They've enslaved millions of beings and plan to exterminate every free civilization in the galaxy. This isn't a territorial dispute. This is a war for the survival of galactic civilization itself." She turned to look at the tactical displays showing the ongoing liberation operations. "The choice is simple. They can surrender unconditionally and face justice for their crimes, or they can be destroyed completely. But they will never again threaten innocent species." The hegemony's response came 12 hours later. Instead of accepting surrender terms, they launched a desperate counterattack against the Confederation core worlds, hoping to force a negotiated settlement by threatening civilian populations. It was their final mistake. Human forces intercepted the hegemony fleet before it could reach its targets, and the resulting battle lasted less than 4 hours. The entire enemy force was either destroyed or captured, and the hegemony's ability to conduct offensive operations was permanently ended. "Admiral Kethmore," Admiral Chen said as the last enemy ship surrendered, "I think it's time to discuss the post-war galaxy, because whether they formally surrender or not, the hegemony as a military threat is finished." As Admiral Kethmore looked at the tactical displays showing liberated systems throughout former hegemony territory, he realized that the galaxy had fundamentally changed. The age of passive defense and diplomatic solutions was ending. In its place, a new order was emerging, one where freedom would be actively defended by those willing to fight for it. And at the center of that new order stood humanity, a species that had turned warfare into a science and used it to save civilizations instead of conquering them. 3 years after the end of the Hegemony War, Ambassador Vextai stood in the Grand Assembly Hall of New Geneva Station, watching delegates from over 200 species take their seats for the annual Galactic Alliance Summit. The station itself was a marvel of cooperative engineering, built with human construction techniques but incorporating architectural elements from dozens of different worlds. The Galactic Confederation had evolved into something stronger, the Galactic Alliance. The change wasn't just in name. Where the Confederation had focused on peaceful coexistence among member worlds, the Alliance was dedicated to actively protecting freedom throughout the galaxy. "The session will come to order," announced Admiral Chen, now serving as the Alliance's Director of Strategic Defense. She had traded her military uniform for civilian clothes, but her bearing still suggested someone ready to fight at a moment's notice. The first item on the agenda was the integration report for the former hegemony territories. Dr. Thexon, now the Alliance's Director of Liberation Operations, stood to address the assembly. "Ladies, gentlemen, and respected entities," he began, "I'm pleased to report that the liberation of former hegemony worlds continues ahead of schedule. 147 systems have been successfully integrated into the Alliance, with full democratic governments established on 89 worlds. The statistics were impressive, but Ambassador Vexistai knew the real story was more complex. The process of rebuilding entire civilizations after decades or centuries of slavery wasn't something that could be measured in simple numbers. "What about the species that were considered extinct?" asked Representative Koltar of the Zentari Assembly. "Remarkable recoveries," Dr. Thexon replied. 23 species that we thought had been completely destroyed have surviving populations that were hidden in slave camps or remote colonies. The Vorthak alone have over 2 million survivors scattered across 30 different worlds." Admiral Kethmore, now serving as the Alliance's chief military advisor, stood to add his perspective. "The integration process has been accelerated by human military doctrine. Instead of occupying former hegemony worlds, human forces established security perimeters and then immediately began training local defense forces. The concept had been revolutionary. Previous galactic civilizations would have established military governments in conquered territory, leading to resentment and eventual rebellion. Humans had done something different. They had turned former enemies into allies by giving them the tools to defend themselves. The numbers speak for themselves," Admiral Kethmore continued. 47 former hegemony worlds now contribute ships and personnel to Alliance defense forces. Species that were enslaved just 3 years ago are now active partners in maintaining galactic security. Admiral Chen nodded approvingly. "The principle is simple. People fight harder for their own freedom than they do for someone else's empire. By helping liberated species defend themselves, we've created a network of mutual defense that's stronger than any single military force." But the real test of the new galactic order had come 6 months earlier, when long-range sensors detected massive fleets moving in the galactic outer rim. Species that had remained hidden during the hegemony's reign of terror, now emerging to test the strength of the Alliance. Captain Yilara, now serving as the Alliance's Director of First Contact Operations, stood to address that situation. "The emergence of the Void Fleet Confederacy has created new challenges for our expansion efforts. These are species that survived the hegemony by becoming militaristic isolationists. They view our liberation operations as potential threats to their security. The Void Fleet had approached Alliance territory with over 3,000 ships, demanding that human forces withdraw from the outer rim. It had been a tense confrontation that could have led to another galactic war. "How was the situation resolved?" asked Representative Naldrex of the Crystalline Assembly. Captain Yilara smiled. "With typical human pragmatism. Instead of treating the Void Fleet as enemies, Admiral Chen invited their leadership to observe Alliance liberation operations in action. The solution had been elegant in its simplicity. The Void Fleet commanders, expecting to find an aggressive, human empire, instead witnessed the systematic liberation of slave worlds and the establishment of democratic governments. They saw former enemies become allies, and oppressed populations become partners. The result," Captain Yilara continued, "is that the Void Fleet Confederacy has requested associate membership in the Alliance. They're contributing ships and personnel to our border defense forces in exchange for technological assistance and trade agreements." Ambassador Vexitai reflected on how much had changed since that first folklore symposium where she had discussed human myths. The humans had proven to be everything the legends claimed and nothing like what anyone had expected. "If I may address the assembly," she said, standing from her seat. The hall fell quiet as delegates turned to listen. 3 years ago, I gave a presentation on human mythology to the Confederation Council. I described stories about a warrior species that could turn anything into a weapon and treated war as a science. She paused, looking around the assembly hall at the incredible diversity of species now working together. I was wrong about almost everything. Humans aren't warriors by nature, they're protectors by choice. They don't love war, they're simply willing to fight when fighting is necessary to protect others. She activated a holographic display that showed the current Alliance territory. Where the old Confederation had controlled perhaps 30% of habitable systems, the Alliance now protected, or had defensive agreements, with over 70% of known civilizations. The human approach to conflict resolution is fundamentally different from anything we've seen before, she continued. Instead of avoiding war, they prepare for it so thoroughly that potential enemies choose peace instead. Instead of conquering territory, they liberate populations and help them become self-governing allies. Admiral Chen stood to respond. Ambassador, Vexitai is correct about our approach, but she's missing a crucial point. Everything we've accomplished has been possible only because of the partnership between human military capabilities and Confederation diplomatic expertise. She gestured to the diverse assembly of delegates. Humans are good at fighting, but we're not particularly good at building the kind of peaceful society that makes fighting unnecessary. That's where our alien partners excel. You've taught us that victory in war is meaningless without a just peace afterward. The comment sparked a general discussion about the nature of the human-alien partnership that had become the foundation of the Alliance. Species that had been pacifistic for centuries were learning basic military strategy, while humans were studying alien approaches to conflict resolution and social organization. The most interesting development, observed Dr. Thexon, is the emergence of hybrid doctrines, Althari diplomatic protocols combined with human threat assessment procedures, Zentari logistics systems integrated with human tactical flexibility. We're seeing the evolution of entirely new approaches to interspecies cooperation. Representative Koltar raised a concern that had been troubling many of the newer Alliance members. But what happens when we encounter species that can't be negotiated with or liberated? Not everyone will respond to our combination of diplomatic and military pressure. Admiral Chen's expression grew serious. Then we'll deal with them using whatever methods are necessary to protect innocent populations. The Alliance has made a commitment to defend freedom throughout the galaxy. We won't abandon that commitment just because it becomes difficult or dangerous. The statement was met with approving sounds from throughout the assembly. The species that had joined the Alliance understood that their security depended on the willingness of others to fight for shared values. As the formal session concluded, Ambassador Vexitai found herself standing at one of the station's observation windows, looking out at the Alliance fleet patrolling the system. The ships were no longer purely human designs. They incorporated technologies and aesthetic elements from dozens of different species. A young Althari officer approached her. Lieutenant Kexival had grown up during the war years and now served aboard the human flagship Indomitable as part of the Alliance's integrated crew exchange program. Ambassador, she said, my grandmother asked me to give you a message. She wanted to thank you for your folklore presentation 3 years ago. Ambassador Vexitai was confused. Thank me, but I was wrong about almost everything. That's exactly what she wanted to thank you for, Lieutenant Kexival replied. She said that if you had been right about humans being mythical warriors, the galaxy would have been conquered by the hegemony. But because you were wrong, because humans turned out to be ordinary people willing to do extraordinary things when others needed protection, millions of beings are alive and free today. The lieutenant paused, looking out at the diverse fleet protecting the station. Grandmother says the most important thing about myths is knowing when to stop believing in them and start believing in something better. As Ambassador Vexitai watched, the mixed fleet of human and alien vessels conduct their patrol operations. She understood what the young officer meant. The myths about humanity had been both completely wrong and absolutely correct. Humans weren't legendary warriors. They were something much more valuable. They were ordinary people who became extraordinary when others needed them to be. In the distance, Earth hung in space like a small blue marble, no longer the source of myths but the symbol of a simple truth. Sometimes the best way to preserve peace is to be very, very good at war, and the best way to win a war is to make sure your former enemies become your future allies. The age of human mythology was over. The age of human partnership with the galaxy had begun. Admiral Chen joined Ambassador Vextai at the observation window, looking out at the fleet that now included ships from over 50 different species. "Any regrets about how things turned out?" she asked. Ambassador Vextai smiled. "Only that it took us so long to realize that the best myths are the ones that turn out to be better than true." In the depths of space, automated sensor stations continued their silent watch over unexplored regions of the galaxy. The readings they transmitted showed new energy signatures, unknown ship designs, and evidence of civilizations that had not yet been contacted by the Alliance. But for the first time in galactic history, those unknowns didn't represent threats to be feared or ignored. They represented opportunities for new partnerships, new alliances, and new species to join the growing community of free civilizations. The galaxy was vast and full of dangers, but it was no longer full of myths. Instead, it was full of possibilities, protected by the simple principle that when good people decide something is worth fighting for, that something tends to stay protected. And in a universe where freedom was actively defended by those willing to fight for it, even the most dangerous myths could become the foundation for the most peaceful reality. The alarm sounded at exactly 3:17 a.m. Earth time. Admiral James Walker jumped from his bed in the space station orbiting Earth. He had been in charge of Earth's defense fleet for 15 years, but this was the first time the deep space sensors had detected something this unusual. "Report," he ordered as he entered the control room, still adjusting his uniform. "Sir, we picked up an unknown object entering the solar system," said Officer Tom Miller, pointing at the main screen. "It's moving faster than anything we've ever seen." Walker leaned forward, his eyes fixed on the blinking dot that was now passing. Jupiter's orbit. For years, humans had wondered if they were alone in the universe. Now they had their answer. "Have they sent any signals?" Walker asked. "No, sir. Nothing we can detect." Walker took a deep breath. This moment would change human history forever. He had trained for this, though many had laughed at the idea of preparing for alien contact. "Activate Protocol First Light," he ordered. Around the world, military bases went on high alert. In underground bunkers, weapon systems that most people didn't know existed powered up. But Walker was not planning to shoot first. "Send the message," he said. Officer Miller nodded and pressed a button. The message they had prepared years ago began transmitting in all directions. It was simple but clear. "This is Earth. We welcome peaceful contact with other intelligent life. We are a developing civilization that wishes no harm to others. However, we will defend ourselves if threatened. Please respond with your intentions." The message was sent in basic mathematical code that any advanced civilization should understand, along with simple pictures showing humans and Earth. "Now we wait," said Walker. Far beyond Neptune's orbit, the sleek ship of the Galactic Empire received Earth's message. Captain Dorn, a tall being with pale blue skin, listened as his communications officer played the transmission. "How interesting," Dorn said with a smile that showed his sharp teeth. "These humans think they can defend themselves." His second-in-command, Officer Rel, laughed. "They've barely left their own planet. Our scans show their technology is at least 3 centuries behind ours." Dorn nodded. "Send the data back to the High Council. This system is perfect for our needs. Good resources, habitable planet, and only a minor species to deal with." On the Imperial capital world, Emperor Vex sat on his throne as the High Council gathered to hear the report from Earth. The Emperor was old, even by his species' standards, with dark gray skin and eyes that seemed to hold no light. "So," he said after reviewing the data, "another primitive world has discovered our presence. They sent a warning, Your Majesty, said Council Member Tara, one of the few who usually spoke up against aggressive action. Perhaps we should respect their space and move on. There are many uninhabited systems. Emperor Vex waved his hand dismissively. A warning? From them? Their most advanced weapons couldn't even scratch our smallest ships. The Emperor stood, looking at the hologram of Earth floating in the center of the chamber. The Empire has stood for 10,000 years by following one simple rule. We take what we want. This Earth has resources we need for the Eastern expansion. Their warning means nothing. But Your Majesty, Tara tried again. Our scouts report unusual energy readings from some of their military installations. There might be more. Enough, Vex's voice echoed through the chamber. Council Member Tara, your constant caution grows tiresome. We will proceed as we always have. Standard colonization protocol will begin immediately. The other council members nodded in agreement. None wanted to question the Emperor after seeing his anger. Commander Trell, Vex called to his military leader, prepare the 7th Fleet. I want Earth secured within 1 standard month. As you command, Your Majesty. Trell bowed low. Back on the space station, 3 days had passed with no response to Earth's message. Walker had not left the control room, surviving on coffee and little sleep. Sir, called Miller. The object has changed course. It's heading back out of the system. Walker frowned. They didn't even respond to our message. Maybe they're peaceful. After all, Miller suggested hopefully. No, Walker shook his head. They scanned us thoroughly. They know we're here. They just didn't think we were worth talking to. Walker walked to the window, looking out at the blue-green planet below. 20 years ago, nations had still fought each other. Now, faced with the possibility of something beyond their world, humanity had finally started working together. Connect me to the World Security Council, Walker ordered. Minutes later, the faces of 12 world leaders appeared on the screen. Ladies and gentlemen, Walker began, the alien vessel is leaving our system, but I believe this is just a scout. They didn't respond to our message, which suggests they don't see us as equals worthy of communication. What do you suggest, Admiral? Asked the President of the United Alliance. We need to speed up Project SHIELD. If they come back, they probably won't be friendly. That will cost trillions, said another leader. The cost of doing nothing could be everything, Walker replied. Simply, after hours of debate, the council voted. Project SHIELD would receive all the funding and resources it needed. Earth would prepare for war while hoping for peace. 6 months passed. The deep space sensors remained quiet, though Walker ordered them extended even further into space. On Tapo, Earth factories worked day and night building ships and weapons based on new technologies that scientists had been developing in secret for years. Then, one ordinary Tuesday, the alarm sounded again. Multiple objects detected, sir, said Miller, his face pale. At least 30 ships much larger than the Scout. They're heading straight for Earth. Walker watched as the screen showed the Imperial fleet entering the solar system. This was what he had feared and prepared for. Send the message again, he ordered. One more chance for peace. The message went out, repeating Earth's warning. This time, there was a response, but not the one Walker had hoped for. A hologram appeared in the center of the control room. Commander Trell of the Empire stood tall and proud in his military uniform. People of Earth, he said, his voice cold. Your world is now part of the Galactic Empire. Your resources belong to us. Your people will serve us. Resistance is not advised, but will be met with immediate destruction. You have 6 hours to surrender control of your governments to our representatives. The message ended. Walker looked around the room at the shocked faces of his crew. They think we're helpless, he said quietly. They ignored our warning. He pressed a button on his console, sending a simple code to every military base on Earth and the hidden bases on the Moon and Mars. The Empire has made their choice, Walker said. Now they'll see that Earth's warning wasn't empty words. Launch all defense systems. The war has begun. Commander Trell watched Earth grow larger on the main screen of his flagship. The blue planet looked peaceful from space, completely unaware of the fate about to befall it. The Imperial fleet, 30 massive warships arranged in perfect formation, had entered Earth's orbit without any resistance. Pathetic, Trell said, turning to his officers. Not even a single defensive satellite in orbit. Captain Dorn, now serving directly under Trell after his successful scouting mission, nodded in agreement. Their technology is primitive, Commander. As I reported, they've barely managed space travel to their own moon. Begin standard invasion protocol, Trell ordered. Target their largest military installations first. Once their defenses are broken, we'll move to government centers. As the Imperial ships positioned themselves around the planet, a message came through on all frequencies. The face of Admiral Walker appeared on the screen. This is Earth's final warning, Walker said, his voice calm but firm. We have detected your weapon systems powering up. Any hostile action against our planet will be met with full defensive measures. We are willing to discuss peaceful contact, but we will not be conquered. Trell laughed along with his bridge crew. How adorable. They still think they have a choice. He turned to his weapons officer. Target their largest military base in the continent they call Australia. Fire when ready. Yes, Commander, the officer replied, inputting commands. The massive Imperial warship hummed as its main cannon charged. Seconds later, a beam of energy shot toward Earth, aimed at the joint military base near Darwin. On Earth, Admiral Walker stood in the Global Defense Command Center deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. Around him, military leaders from every major nation watched as the Imperial ships took position. They're targeting the Darwin base, reported General Maria Cruz, head of Pacific Defense. Walker nodded. Just as we predicted. Activate Quantum Shield Alpha. Across the planet, hidden facilities powered up. For 20 years, Earth's best scientists had been secretly working on technology reverse-engineered from a crashed alien ship found in Antarctica. The public had never been told about the crash or the technological leaps it had provided. As the Imperial energy beam approached Darwin, a shimmering blue dome appeared over the base. When the beam struck, instead of destruction, there was only a bright flash as the shield absorbed and dispersed the energy. On the Imperial flagship, Commander Trell stared in disbelief at the readout. What happened? He demanded. Why is the base still there? Unknown, Commander, the weapons officer replied, checking his instruments. The energy signature suggests some kind of deflection technology, but their development level shouldn't allow for... Fire again, Trell shouted. Full power. 3 more Imperial ships joined the attack, all targeting the same location. Again, the shield held firm. In the Global Defense Command, Walker allowed himself a small smile. Phase 1 complete. They've taken the bait. Now for Phase 2. He pressed a button on his console. All orbital platforms, you are cleared to engage. Across Earth's orbit, what had appeared to be small communication satellites suddenly transformed. Hidden panels opened, revealing advanced weapon systems. There were hundreds of these platforms positioned so perfectly that the Imperial fleet hadn't recognized them as threats. The first volley caught the Empire completely by surprise. Concentrated energy beams sliced through the shields of 3 Imperial cruisers, cutting them in half. The explosions lit up Earth's orbit like new stars. Impossible! Dorn shouted as the deck beneath him shook. Their weapons can't be this advanced. Trell gripped his command chair as warning alarms blared across the bridge. Battle formation. Return fire on those platforms. Launch all fighters. The Fanchu. Imperial fleet scrambled to respond, but they were already at a disadvantage. The orbital platforms were smaller and more nimble than the massive Imperial ships, able to reposition quickly while maintaining fire. Commander, Dorn said, his voice shaking. We're receiving reports of more Earth vessels approaching from behind the moon. What? Trell turned to the tactical display. Sure enough, a fleet of Earth ships was emerging from hiding. They were smaller than the Imperial warships, but moved with surprising speed and coordination. On the lead Earth ship, Captain Lisa Chen sat calmly in the command chair. All vessels engage as planned. Target their engines and weapon systems. Remember your training. The Earth fleet, hidden and built in secret lunar bases over the past decade, moved into perfect attack formation. These ships represented the HFY, pinnacle of human engineering, enhanced by the alien technology they had studied. The battle in orbit quickly turned chaotic. Imperial ships, designed for overwhelming force against inferior opponents, found themselves fighting an enemy that had prepared specifically for them. Back in the command center, Walker received updates from around the world. Sir, Imperial landing. Craft have been detected approaching major cities, reported General Cruz. Activate ground defense grids, Walker ordered, and get me a direct line to their command ship. As the battle raged in orbit, Walker's face appeared on the screen of the Imperial flagship once more. Commander Trell, Walker said, your attack has failed. You've already lost 5 ships and we've barely begun to fight. I'm offering you one chance to withdraw your forces and leave our system. Trell's face twisted with rage. This is impossible. You're nothing but primitives. How did you? We've been preparing for this day for 20 years, Walker replied calmly. The scout ship you sent wasn't the first alien vessel to reach Earth. We found one that crashed. We learned from it. We built our defenses knowing someday someone like you would come. Trell's eyes widened with understanding and fear. The Empire had always relied on technological superiority for its conquests. Without that advantage, Commander, Dorn interrupted urgently, 3 more cruisers have been destroyed. Our shields are failing across the fleet. Trell looked around, his bridge seeing the fear in his officer's eyes. This was supposed to be a simple conquest, not a real fight. His crew wasn't prepared for an enemy that could actually hurt them. All ships, he finally ordered, fall back to minimum safe distance, regroup at the edge of the system. As the surviving Imperial ships retreated from Earth orbit, leaving their destroyed comrades behind, Walker turned to the world leaders gathered in the command center. It's not over, he said soberly. They'll be back with a larger force once they report what happened. But we've shown them that Earth won't fall easily. He looked at the tactical display showing the retreating Imperial ships. The real war is just beginning. On the Imperial flagship, now limping away from Earth, Commander Trell composed his message to Emperor Vex. How could he explain this disaster? How could he tell the Emperor that the primitive humans had technology that rivaled their own? As the ship accelerated away from the blue planet, Trell looked back at the view screen one last time. Earth had sent a warning, and the Empire had ignored it. Now they would pay the price for their arrogance. The emergency meeting of the World Security Council began exactly 3 hours after the Imperial fleet retreated. In a massive underground chamber beneath Geneva, leaders from every nation on Earth gathered around a circular table. Their faces showed a mix of relief, fear, and determination. Admiral Walker stood at the center, next to a holographic display showing the battle in orbit. The remaining debris of Imperial ships still burned in Earth's atmosphere, creating spectacular light, shows visible from the ground. Ladies and gentlemen, Walker began, we've won the first battle, but this war has only just begun. Our intelligence suggests the Empire controls thousands of worlds across the galaxy. What we faced today was merely a small fraction of their military power. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Humanity had survived its first encounter with alien invaders, but at what cost? And how would they fare against a full-scale assault? Admiral, said President Chen of the United Alliance, what's your assessment of their likely response? Walker nodded to a woman sitting quietly at the edge of the room. I'll let Dr. Emma Reed answer that. She's been leading our defense research program for the past 15 years. Dr. Reed approached the center of the room. Though in her 60s, she moved with energy and purpose. Her eyes reflected the intelligence that had helped prepare Earth for this day. The Empire will not take this defeat lightly, she said, her voice steady. Based on the transmissions we intercepted, they are already gathering a much larger fleet. We estimate we have about 3 weeks before they return. Can we win against a larger force? Asked the Russian president. Dr. Reed activated a new display. Not with conventional tactics. The orbital platforms and shield technology gave us an advantage because they were unexpected. Next time, the Empire will be prepared for these defenses. Then what do you suggest? Asked President Chen. Dr. Reed looked at Walker, who nodded. It's time to reveal Project Achilles, she said. The holographic display changed to show a complex, device unlike anything the world leaders had seen before. 20 years ago, Dr. Reed explained, when we recovered the crashed alien ship in Antarctica, we found more than just technology. We found their communication system. For 2 decades, we've been quietly listening to the Empire's transmissions, learning their language, their tactics, and, most importantly, the weaknesses in their network. Gasps and murmurs filled the room. Project Achilles is a weapon designed to target not their ships but their command and control systems, Reed continued. It can disrupt their quantum communication network, rendering their coordinated attacks impossible. President Chen leaned forward. If you've had this technology for 20 years, why didn't we use it today? Because we only get one chance, Reed replied. Once we deploy it, they'll adapt. We needed to save it for when we face their full force. Walker took over the briefing. While Project Achilles will give us an advantage, it won't win the war alone. We need to take the fight to them. He pressed a button, and the display changed again, showing a hidden fleet of Earth ships much larger than what they had revealed earlier. These vessels have been built in secret asteroid bases throughout the solar system. They're equipped with our most advanced technology, including faster-than-light drive reverse-engineered from the crashed ship. The leaders stared in amazement. The secret fleet was at least 3 times the size of what they had used in the initial battle. How did you keep this hidden from the public? Asked the African Union representative. Walker smiled slightly. The same way we kept the crashed ship secret. Classified projects, compartmentalized information, and funding hidden in plain sight within regular defense budgets. Captain Roy Davis will lead our primary strike force, Walker continued, nodding to a tall man in uniform standing nearby. Davis stepped forward. He was younger than most of the other military leaders, only in his late 30s, but his reputation was legendary among those in the know. My team has been training for this mission for 5 years, Davis said. While the main fleet engages their forces, we'll infiltrate their command ship using stealth technology. Our goal is to extract their military database and plant the Achilles device at the heart of their communication network. The French president stood. This all sounds impressive, but we're talking about fighting an empire that spans thousands of worlds. Even with this technology, how can we possibly win? Dr. Reed answered, we don't need to defeat their entire empire. We just need to make conquering Earth too costly for them to continue. The empire has existed for millennia by easily overwhelming less advanced civilizations. They've never faced a serious challenge. We believe they've grown complacent. Meeting continued for hours as plans were made and resources allocated. When it finally ended, the world leaders left with a mix of hope and fear. Earth was about to take its first steps into a much larger conflict. 3 days later, Captain Davis stood in the hangar of Earth's secret lunar base, addressing the 50 men and women who would join him on the infiltration mission. You all know what's at stake, he said, looking at each member of his team. If we fail, Earth falls, it's that simple. But I've trained with each of you, and I know what you can do. The Empire thinks humans are weak. They think we're primitive. Today we prove them wrong. The team cheered as they boarded their ship, a sleek vessel designed for stealth. It was called the Shadow, and it lived up to its name. Its surface absorbed all light and radar, making it nearly invisible to sensors. As Davis took his seat in the command chair, he received a transmission from Admiral Walker. Captain, our deep space sensors have detected movement. The Imperial reinforcements are on their way, and they're coming sooner than we expected. You need to launch now. Davis acknowledged the order and signaled his pilot to begin launch procedures. All personnel, prepare for immediate departure, he announced over the ship's comm system. Our timetable has been moved up. The enemy is approaching faster than expected. As the Shadow lifted off from the lunar surface, Davis looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there was the heart of an empire that had conquered countless worlds. They thought Earth would be just another easy victory. They were wrong. Back on Earth, Admiral Walker watched as the global defense systems came fully online. Shields extended over major cities, weapons platforms repositioned in orbit. The hidden fleet emerged from bases throughout the solar system, taking defensive positions. Dr. Reed joined him in the command center. carrying the final prototype of the Achilles device. "The backup is ready," she said, placing it carefully on a secure table. "If Davis fails to plant the primary device, we'll have to use this one here." Walker nodded grimly. "Let's hope it doesn't come to that." They both looked up at the main screen, which showed the approaching Imperial fleet. This time there were hundreds of ships, not just 30. Earth had sent its warning. The Empire had chosen war. Now humanity would fight for its very existence. Emperor Vex had never felt rage like this before. His wrinkled gray face turned almost black with anger as he watched the holographic recording of the battle at Earth for the third time. Commander Trell stood before him, head bowed, awaiting judgment. "5 cruisers destroyed," Vex hissed, his voice barely above a whisper. "A third of your fleet disabled. By primitives." The Imperial throne room was silent except for the Emperor's voice. The 12 members of the High Council sat frozen in their seats, not daring to speak. "Your Majesty," Trell began, his voice shaking. "They had technology we didn't expect. Somehow they've advanced far beyond what our scouts reported." "Excuses," Vex shouted, slamming his fist on the arm of his throne. "The Empire has conquered 1,000 worlds. Never, never have we retreated from primitives who have barely left their own planet." Council member Terra finally found the courage to speak. "Perhaps, Your Majesty, we should reconsider. If these humans have such technology—" "Silence," the Emperor roared. He pointed a long finger at Trell. "You will return to Earth with the first and second fleets. You will destroy their defenses. You will burn their cities. You will make an example of them that the entire galaxy will remember for 1,000 years." Trell bowed low. "Yes, Your Majesty." As Trell left to prepare the massive invasion fleet, Terra exchanged worried glances with a few other council members. The Emperor's judgment was clouded by anger. This human planet had somehow developed technology that could challenge Imperial ships. The standard approach might not work this time. Far from the Imperial capital, Captain Davis's stealth ship exited, faster than light travel at the edge of the system. Before them floated a massive space station, the forward command post for the Imperial invasion force. "Active camouflage engaged," reported Lieutenant Anna Brown, the Shadow's tactical officer. "Their sensors show no sign of detecting us." Davis nodded. "Begin approach pattern. Remember, we need to get close enough to tap into their network without being spotted." The Shadow glided silently through space, its surface absorbing all light and energy signals. To any observer, it would appear as nothing more than a slight distortion easily mistaken for a sensor glitch. As they approached the station, Davis checked his team one last time. 20 would remain with the ship, while he would lead 30 operators onto the station itself. Each wore advanced stealth suits that bent light around them, making them nearly invisible. "Docking in 30 seconds, reported the pilot. Davis took a deep breath. "Once we're in, we have exactly 45 minutes to reach the central data hub, download their military network information, and plant the Achilles device. After that, the shift change will make it impossible to remain undetected." The ship attached itself to an emergency airlock on the underside of the station. Using specialized tools, they bypassed the security systems and entered without triggering any alarms. Moving in perfect formation, Davis led his team through the maze of corridors. Years of studying Imperial ship designs from intercepted transmissions had prepared them for this mission. They knew exactly where to go and how to avoid the patrols. When they reached the central data hub, Davis signaled for his tech specialists to begin their work. Lieutenant Brown connected to the Imperial network and began downloading the military database. "Sir," she whispered after a few minutes, "I'm finding something interesting. There's significant communication from multiple worlds questioning the Emperor's decision to attack Earth." Davis looked over her shoulder at the data stream. "It seems we're not the only ones who think this war is a mistake." "The download is complete," Brown reported, "and I've planted the Achilles device in their network core. It's set to activate, on your command." Davis nodded. "Let's get out of here." As they made their way back to the ship, an alarm suddenly blared throughout the station. "What happened?" Davis demanded. "Unknown, sir. Brown replied, checking her scanner. The alarm isn't related to us, something else is happening. They quickened their pace, reaching the shadow just as Imperial troops began running toward the bomb. Command Center. Once safely aboard, Davis ordered an immediate departure. As they pulled away from the station, they intercepted the emergency broadcast. All Imperial forces, this is a priority alert, came the message. Earth defense forces have been detected approaching the outer planets of the home system. Repeat, human ships have bypassed our forward defenses and are approaching the Imperial capital. All available vessels are ordered to return for defense. Davis couldn't believe what he was hearing. Admiral Walker moved up the timetable. He's launched a direct assault on their homeworld. Back at Earth, Admiral Walker stood in the command center, watching as the remaining defense fleet engaged the approaching Imperial armada. The battle was intense, with losses on both sides, but the Earth ships were holding their own. Dr. Reed entered, her face grim. We've lost contact with the lunar base. The Empire has landed troops there. Walker nodded. As expected, they're trying to take out our secondary command center. He turned to her. Is the Achilles protocol ready? Yes, but without confirmation that Davis has planted the primary device, we can't be sure of full effectiveness. Walker looked at the battle displays. Earth's defenses were strong, but the sheer number of Imperial ships was overwhelming. They couldn't hold out forever. We've waited long enough, he decided. Activate the protocol. Dr. Reed inserted a key into the console and entered a complex code. Achilles protocol activated. Effect will begin in 3 minutes. Across the galaxy, on thousands of Imperial ships and bases, something strange began to happen. Communication systems flickered. Navigation, computers showed incorrect data. Weapons systems wouldn't respond to commands. On the Imperial capital, Emperor Vex was in the middle of ordering the planetary defense grid to fire on the approaching Earth ships when every screen in the command center went dark. What is happening? He demanded. Unknown, Your Majesty, replied the chief technician. We're experiencing system-wide failures across the entire network. Fix it, Vex shouted. We're trying, but the problem seems to be in the base code of our quantum communication system. As the Empire's military network collapsed into chaos, reports began coming in from across the galaxy. Imperial garrisons on conquered worlds were losing control. Subject species were rising up, taking advantage of the confusion to fight for freedom. Captain Davis, monitoring the situation from the shadow, activated the comlink to Earth. Admiral Walker, this is Davis. The Achilles device is working perfectly. The Imperial military network is collapsing. Their entire command structure is in disarray. Excellent work, Captain, Walker replied. Return to Earth immediately. Phase 3 is complete. Now we move to the final phase. On the Imperial capital, Council Member Tara entered the Emperor's private chambers without waiting for permission. Behind her were 4 other council members and a group of high-ranking military officers. Your Majesty, she said firmly, the war with Earth has become a disaster. Our forces are scattered. Rebellions have broken out on 17 worlds. The Council has voted. This conflict must end before we lose everything. Emperor Vex stared at her in disbelief. You dare to challenge me? Not challenge, Your Majesty. Save. The Empire has stood for 10,000 years because we know when to fight and when to negotiate. These humans have proven themselves worthy opponents. We must treat them as such. The Emperor looked at the military officers. And you agree with this cowardice? The highest-ranking officer stepped forward. Your Majesty, we cannot fight an enemy who can disable our entire communication network. We must adapt or we will fall. Vex sank into his chair, suddenly looking every one of his 300 years. The empire he had ruled for decades was changing before his eyes, all because of one small blue planet that had sent a warning he had chosen to ignore. Captain Roy Davis stood tall as he entered the grand hall of the former Imperial Palace. 1 month had passed since the activation of the Achilles Protocol, and the galaxy had changed forever. The massive room, with its towering columns and ornate ceiling, was filled with representatives from dozens of worlds. Some were human, sent from Earth's various nations. Others were beings Davis had never seen before, former subjects of the Empire who had seized their freedom during the chaos. At the center of the hall stood a large round table, replacing the throne that Emperor Vex had once occupied. This was to be the first meeting of the new Galactic Council, with all members sitting as equals. Davis spotted Admiral Walker and Dr. Reed among the Earth delegation and made his way toward them. "Captain," Walker greeted him with a firm handshake. "Good to see you. Your mission was the turning point in this conflict." Davis shook his head. "The Achilles Protocol was the key. I just delivered the package." Dr. Reed smiled. "Always modest, but without your team's successful infiltration, we might have lost everything." They looked around at the gathering delegates. Species of all shapes, sizes, and colors mingled freely, many meeting each other for the first time without Imperial oversight. "Hard to believe how much has changed in just a month," Davis said. Walker nodded. The Empire had kept these worlds isolated from each other, ruling through fear and division. Once their control systems failed, the whole system began to collapse. A tall being with 6 arms approached them. "Admiral Walker of Earth? I am first, Speaker Lam of the Rigel system. My people wish to express our gratitude for your role in freeing us from Imperial rule." Walker bowed slightly. "We were fighting for our own survival, First Speaker, but we're glad others found freedom as well." "The Achilles Protocol didn't just disrupt their military network," Dr. Reed explained. "It exposed Emperor Vex's secret communications to all Imperial worlds. They learned how he had been manipulating them for centuries, playing worlds against each other." First Speaker Lam nodded. "Many of us had suspected, but without proof we dared not rebel. Your actions gave us the chance we needed." A chime sounded, indicating the meeting was about to begin. The delegates moved to take their seats around the great table. At one section sat the former Imperial representatives, now led by Council Member Tara. Emperor Vex was nowhere to be seen. "What happened to the Emperor?" Davis asked quietly. "Removed by his own military," Walker replied. "He's under house arrest in one of his private palaces. The new Imperial leadership is much more practical." The meeting began with Tara standing to address the gathering. Her voice was clear and carried throughout the hall. "For 10,000 years, the Empire has ruled through force and fear. Today, we acknowledge that this approach has failed. The conflict with Earth has shown us that true strength comes not from conquest, but from cooperation." She looked directly at the Earth delegation. "We underestimated humans. We saw their warning as the empty threat of a primitive species. We were wrong." Admiral Walker stood to respond. "Earth did not seek this conflict. We only wished to protect our world and our freedom. Now we seek to build something better than endless war." A holographic display appeared above the table, showing a proposed treaty. Its terms were clear. The Empire would recognize Earth's complete sovereignty and the right of humans to establish colonies within their solar system. Earth would share certain technologies with former Imperial worlds, helping to rebuild damaged planets. A mutual defense pact would be established, with all member worlds pledging to protect each other from external threats. No world would seek to conquer another, resolving disputes through the new Galactic Council. The debate continued for hours, with representatives raising concerns and suggesting changes. Davis was amazed at how civil the discussion remained, given that many of these species had been bitter enemies just weeks ago. By the day's end, the treaty was approved. The galaxy would move forward under a new system, not an empire, but a federation of equal worlds. As the meeting concluded, Davis found himself standing next to Tara. "Your people fought well," she said, studying him with curious eyes. "In all my years on the council, I never saw Emperor Vex so shaken as when he learned of your victory in the first battle." "We had a good reason to fight," Davis replied. "Everything we loved was at stake." Tara nodded thoughtfully. Perhaps that is what the Empire had forgotten, to fight for something more than power. 1 week later, Admiral Walker stood on a hill, overlooking the newly constructed memorial in what had once been the battlefield of Sydney. The black stone monument bore the names of every human who had died during the brief but fierce war. Dr. Reed joined him, looking older than her years. The conflict had taken its toll on everyone, but perhaps most on those who had spent decades preparing for it. 20 years of work, she said quietly. Sometimes I wasn't sure we'd ever be ready. Walker placed a hand on her shoulder. You gave humanity a fighting chance. Without Project Achilles, without the reverse-engineered technology, we would have been just another conquered world. Below them, Captain Davis was leading the first class of Earth's new galactic defense force. Young men and women who would serve on Earth's growing fleet of starships. They would be the guardians of not just Earth, but all the worlds that had joined the Federation. We've established the defense perimeter around our solar system, Walker told Reed. The new detection grid can spot approaching ships 3 times farther than before. No one will ever catch us by surprise again. Reed smiled. And our new allies have helped us improve the shield technology. It's being installed in all major cities and colonies. They watched as a ship took off from the nearby spaceport, one of the new joint human-alien vessels that would serve as peacekeepers throughout the sector. The Empire chose war, Walker said, his eyes on the rising ship. They ignored our warning. But from that mistake, something better has emerged. At the base of the memorial, a simple plaque bore the words that had become Earth's new motto in the galactic community. Peace through strength, prosperity through cooperation. We sent a warning. Now we extend a hand. As the sun set over the memorial, ships from a dozen worlds passed overhead in formation, a salute to those who had fallen and a promise for a better future. Earth had found its place among the stars, not through conquest, but by standing firm when threatened and showing mercy when victorious. The galaxy would never be the same again, and neither would humanity.